I appreciate the explanation on the proposed amendments to the bill. Why are they needed?
They're simply needed because we want to always expand the vote in a democracy and give every person a chance easily to vote. And if we've encountered in past elections, mail has been a problem for many seniors, for many of my constituents. In 2021, the Democratic primary, 84,000 absentee ballots were invalidated due to wrong postage. Folks thought that we'd get there in time with the mail being slow. These drop boxes make it easier to vote. They have them in 33 states in the union and DC, and they've had very little case of fraud. Matter of fact, 0.0024%, and they could rarely ever found it. And the majority who still have the option to vote in person or to vote by dropping out the Board of Elections, the majority use these ballot boxes, which have to be secure, have to have cameras. California came up with a plan where there's a camera, there's security, and clearly there's a cost. The Homeland Security estimates about $6,000 per box. But for democracy, I think it's worth the price.
Understood. Thank you very much. But right now, if I had an absentee ballot, I could still drop it off someplace, right? Mailing isn't my question is, mailing isn't your only method of returning your ballot.
Right, not in New York.
Okay, because you can drop it off either at a Board of Elections, you can actually drop it off at the polling site too, correct?
Correct.
Great. And so voters can also cure missing postmarks right now under the law, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we've already accomplished both of those. Now, there are several categories of ballots that the Board of Elections issues, correct?
Yes.
But your bill only speaks to 2. Is that problematic?
I don't think so. I mean, they would be canvassed like any other ballots. For instance, if a military ballot was accidentally placed in it, those ballots would be collected and canvassed in the same manner as absentee and early vote ballots per election law 9-209. So they would canvass this to check to make sure it hadn't been also mailed.
But then why not also include them in the authorization of the amendment?
They're a form of absentee ballots. And if they're dropped in there, they're just like an absentee ballot. They're a form of absentee ballots.
Yeah, it's because they're a form of absentee ballots because the voter couldn't make it on election day.
So since they fall under the guidance of absentee ballots, my concern is for our Board of Election workers, if it's not explicitly spoken to in the bill, right, and we only have 2 types of ballots that you've identified here, are they going to know and be given the guidance as to how to process them if one of those ballots are not included in this legislation that wind up in one of your drop boxes?
Yes.
Can you explain to me how?
Well, for instance, military ballots are a form of absentee ballots, so they would know to count them.
And same with, I don't know, one of our special federal ballots, because there are people who just vote in federal elections. Federal ballots are separate. Would that fall under the same category?
It would, right? Yes, it would.
Okay. And your amendment, does it limit the number of ballots that someone can drop off into a drop box?
It doesn't speak to that.
Doesn't speak to that. And then I know you talked about security. Does the amendment provide guidelines for a security plan for the Board of Elections to follow?
Like most legislation we passed, it gives it to the local Board of Elections, the agencies to work out, because every area is different, clearly. Security in my district of Manhattan clearly would have to be like a mailbox with cameras. In suburban areas, usually in California, they've used security guards. A lot of times they've added it to places as part of the bank or part of a property, so no one could tamper with it. In most of the cases in all the states, there hasn't been much tampering. The only time they ever had a problem with security was in the last election, when lies were spread about the last election. It caused some folks to vandalize it, but they salvaged most of those ballots and had people resubmit if the ballots were burnt, like what happened in Oregon.
And the security plans, are those security plans promulgated by the State Board of Elections, or you just said the County Board of Elections?
County, right? State Board of Elections in coordination with the County Board of Elections.
And I know in the bill in chief, one of the points that were made last year when we debated it is wondering why we as the legislature aren't providing more specificity to the need for a security plan in the actual legislation.
Well, I think we want to leave it up to the localities since every district clearly is different. Where people vote is different, population is different. That's what they did in California. They've had very little problems. That's what they did in Oregon. They even did it in Alabama with very little problems.
Understood. Understood.